Commence and welcome. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we are assembled today for a briefing on Operation Impact and on Operation Reassurance. Appearing before us today, we have the Minister, the Honourable Jason Kenney, Minister of National Defence, and witnesses from the Department of National Defence, General Thomas Lawson, Chief of the Defence Staff, and also Major General Charles Lamar, Designate Director of Staff, Strategic Joint Staff, and Rear Admiral Gilles Couturier, Director General, International Security Policy. Gentlemen, thank you for your presence with us today. Our time with you is unfortunately cut short by proceedings in the House, but we will continue to the assigned hour at 5:30. Minister, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, honourable colleagues. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. As you know, just a few days ago, Prime Minister Harper and I were aboard HMCS Fredericton in the Baltic Sea, observing their participation in NATO's Operation Baltops, which constitutes part of NATO's assurance measures for our friends and allies in Eastern Europe, and part of Canada's Operation Reassurance. And it was very encouraging to be aboard one of our, actually the first fully modernized Halifax-class Royal Canadian Navy frigate to be deployed in such a fashion overseas, to see the excellent equipment and kit that is resulting from this $4 billion modernization of the frigates in our Navy, but also to see the first-hand remarkable skill and dedication of our men and women in uniform. Monsieur le Président, au sujet de mon voyage la semaine dernière, permettez-moi.
Mr. Chair, speaking of my trip last week, let me start with Canada's contributions in Europe. In response to Russia's aggression in Ukraine, under the umbrella of Operation Reassurance, the Canadian Armed Forces have once again deployed to Europe, training in Central and Eastern Europe to increase interoperability with our allies in the region, and sailing the Mediterranean, Black and Baltic Seas as part of NATO assurance measures.
To Ukraine in the form of financial assistance, the donation of key military equipment of a non-lethal nature, and later this year, the provision of training to Ukrainian military forces. In fact, I hope myself to be able to see the initial deployment of some of our trainers in Ukraine firsthand. And of course, this is in addition to diplomatic and political support represented by the Prime Minister's third visit to Ukraine recently in the last 18 months. On April 13th, of course, we announced this training operation. Our contribution will consist of approximately 200 personnel that will provide training assistance until March 31st, 2017 in the fields of individual and unit tactics training, military police skills and procedures, explosive ordnance disposal, flight safety training, combat first aid, and logistics systems modernization. Grâce à nos efforts et à ceux de nos alliés, nous illustrons la puissance et.
Thanks to our efforts, we illustrate the power of NATO.
NATO counterparts and reaffirm our commitment to the alliance and our solidarity with our Eastern European allies, as I did in meetings with the defense ministers of Poland, Italy, and the United Kingdom last week. We will take key decisions on the implementation of practical measures to strengthen the readiness and responsiveness of our alliance, wherever the threat comes from. Chairman, Russia's aggression in Ukraine has shown NATO's resolve and resiliency, and Russia must understand that the long-standing principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable. Indeed, we believe, I think there's a broad consensus that the best and most effective way to prevent a miscalculation on the part of Mr. Putin's posture of aggression is through a posture of readiness and a message of deterrence. Monsieur le Président, les forces armées canadiennes sont également engagées dans le.
Mr. Chair, the Canadian Armed Forces are also engaged in battling a significant danger to international stability. Since last year, Canada has played a strong role in the multinational coalition countering the atrocities of the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. ISIS has been complicit in absolute atrocities committed against children, against women, against men, against minorities and ethnic groups.
Atrocities, including the rape and enslavement of countless women and children. It is estimated that 7,000 Yazidi women alone are being kept as sex slaves by ISIS. A recent report by the UN's Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights contains countless reports of abductions, rape, and other forms of sexual and gender-based violence perpetrated against both women and children. On vise plus particulièrement les membres des communautés religieuses et ethniques.
They are particularly targeting religious and ethnic minority communities in Iraq, many of whom are slaughtered.
Confront this menace to Iraqi and regional security, and indeed last year we sent troops in an advisory capacity providing assistance to local Peshmerga forces. And as you know, the Prime Minister and I also had an opportunity to meet our Special Operations Forces troops who are engaged in an extremely effective advice and training mission near Erbil in northern Iraq. In addition, approximately 600 personnel are deployed to the region, in October to support Joint Task Force Iraq, the Royal Canadian Air Force operation of three types of aircraft there. The C-150T Polaris that supports coalition area assets in the region with aerial refueling and has now delivered over 10,000 pounds of fuel to coalition aircraft. CP-140 Aurora, the Aurora recently modernized aircraft, providing critical aerial reconnaissance intelligence to the coalition, and of course 6 CF-18 Hornets that have just completed their 100th airstrike against ISIS. And earlier this month, altogether the Royal Canadian Air Force has conducted over 1,000 sorties. Recently, the Government of Canada extended the mission and expanded it to include airstrikes, as you know, against targets in Syria, although there have been very few of those in large measure because of limited intelligence on the ground. But it is important, a strategic statement we are making insofar as ISIS or Daesh does not recognize a border between Iraq and Syria, and they are completely interoperable between the two sides of that border, nor should the coalition in our view. Mr. Chairman, the men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces are providing critical support to the coalition effort. While much has been achieved to stop the advance of ISIS since the start of coalition operations last October, there is more to do. And we are committed to this continued effort to support Iraq's security forces, who must be primarily responsible for their own country's security. Les effets cumulés de frappe contre les objectifs de l'État islamique.
The cumulative effects of striking ISIS targets, along with training support to Iraqi forces, will ultimately allow Iraqi forces to transition into offensive operations. There were some examples of this, but of course the Iraqis on the ground are going to have to do more.
Or disrupting equipment, leadership, or infrastructure will provide the necessary freedom of movement for Iraqi forces to make more tactical gains. Over the long term, success will be achieved when ISIS capabilities are significantly degraded to the point where they can no longer claim credibly to have a caliphate control over large swaths of territory or to pose an international security risk. Now, having said that, Mr. Chairman, obviously there will in any military campaign be regrettable setbacks, as there have been in Ramadi and elsewhere in the region. But fundamentally, in part thanks to the support of coalition forces, ISIS has lost control of approximately 25 to 30% of the territory that it controlled last August. That represents 13,000 to 17,000 square kilometers. So this will require continued persistence. As we know, some of our allies, including the United States, are calibrating somewhat their approach with additional training resources. We will observe that with interest, but we are committed to the current level of operations as defined in the motion that was tabled and supported by the House of Commons recently. Alors, Monsieur le Président, j'estime que les efforts qu'elle déploie et que j'ai décrits.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the efforts that were made that I've described today as part of these operations, Reassurance and Impact, are perfect examples of the efficiency of Canada's forces. I'd be happy to answer your questions, and I would like to thank you.
We will proceed to our first round of questions, 7-minute segments, beginning with Ms. Gallant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. General Lawson, in your recent interview with the media, you dumbed down the problem of sexual harassment in the military to one of biology. Well, your comment dumbed down the position of Chief of Defense Staff. What is it going to take to bring the culture of the military into the 21st century?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I must make it entirely clear that sexual misconduct of any kind in the military is absolutely unacceptable. There is nothing that I could say or would ever say that would indicate that it's acceptable. In my comments yesterday, I stand by the apology for they were an introduction to comments that make it clear that we are committed from the very top. Myself, my key generals, commodores, flag officers, chief petty officers, chief warrant officers, right through the chain of command to our aviators, sailors, and soldiers to rid the Canadian Armed Forces of this problem. What is probably most damaging about my opening comments yesterday was they obscure the work going on in the military right now on this. It obscures the fact that we have surveys that indicate that our men and women in uniform have never been so confident in the sanctity, the safety, the satisfaction with the workplace these days. But that doesn't matter. We've still got an issue with sexual misconduct. We had an internal review. We acted on it. We brought in Madame Deschamps to carry out an external review from which she's come up with 10 recommendations, all of which we will meet the intent of. I have raised under Lieutenant General Whitecross a team of 25 men and women to work on this, and this work is all underway now. I didn't ask Madame Deschamps whether we were better than we were 10 years ago. We have all kinds of indications, including retention figures with our women, which are actually better than with our men, that indicate we are much better. But that doesn't matter. We've got a problem. I didn't ask her to look backwards. I asked her to look at where we are today and how we can get better. And she's come back with 10 points, all of which we will be actioning.
Minister, media reports have questioned your statements pertaining to a March 2015 incident in which the HMCS Fredericton was flown over by Russian aircraft, suggesting the incident didn't occur. Can you speak to what information the Canadian Armed Forces have about this incident?
Yeah, there were some completely inaccurate media reports, Chairman, in this respect. And in order to help clarify those inaccurate reports, I would be happy to table with the committee a declassified version of the incident report that came to us from the commander of the Fredericton, who explained that, and I quote, during an underway replenishment at sea, 2 Russian warplanes closed Fredericton's position and operated in airspace in the vicinity of Fredericton for approximately 30 minutes. The aircraft closed Fredericton's position one at a time at medium altitude, conducting maneuvers to demonstrate they were not carrying weapons. Thereafter, the aircraft continued to operate in the vicinity of Fredericton, flying at low and medium altitudes at distances that ranged from over top to several miles from Fredericton. I'd be happy to table this. In fact, while I was aboard Fredericton last week with the Prime Minister, they actually, the commander and his crew, showed us a recording of their radar tracking of the Russian aircraft flying around and over the vessel in the Black Sea. There have in fact been several such instances of interaction with Russian aircraft, both in the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea, including most recently last week. I understand 5 such incidents in the Black Sea and 5 in the Baltic Sea. I do want to underscore what I said on this matter when I was first questioned about it, I believe in March, which is that at no time have our RCN personnel felt that the Russian aerial reconnaissance missions around and over their vessels constituted a threat. The Russian aircraft appeared to have clearly demonstrated they were not carrying weapons, and so I've never suggested, nor would I, that this poses a threat, but it does demonstrate that the Russian military is aware of our presence as part of the NATO assurance measures, which is the entire point of our deployment.
Okay, Minister, in March, when our Parliament voted to extend and expand Operation Impact into Syria, there appeared to be some miscommunication surrounding the use of precision-guided munitions by our coalition partners. Could you please clarify how and what information was provided by the Canadian Armed Forces to the Minister of National Defence?
Is it to me or?
Yes,
Questions
Minister.
to me. Well, I was, in this respect, Mr. Chairman, I had been advised that Canada's, the Royal Canadian Air Force CF-18 Hornets carried a kind of precision-guided munition that only the United States Air Force was carrying into missions in Syria. And I reflected the advice I'd received in my public comments. I regret that we subsequently learned, I was subsequently briefed that that information was not accurate, that there were at least some of the Middle Eastern Arab air forces carrying dynamic precision-guided munitions on their sorties over ISIL targets in Syria. I regret that I had misinformed the House, and I've apologized for that.
Very brief question, please.
Okay. What measures have been taken to ensure that the forces that the Canadian military will be training in Ukraine will be of proper quality to receive our training, and that it won't be used against our forces or the Ukrainian population in any way?
Well, Chairman, the units of the Ukrainian military that will be trained at the Yavoriv Training Center jointly by Canadian and American trainers starting this summer and fall will initially be National Guard units, and then eventually, we believe, Ukrainian Army regular units of a battalion size in during each rotation. That will be selected and screened by the Ukrainian government, and both the American and Canadian militaries will also be screening those referred to us for training, the units, to ensure that they are not proponents of extremist ideologies. I think you may be referring to one media report. There is, I gather, has been a militia group that is being incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard, one portion of which, I gather one company's element of which, has extremist views, and we will not train those individuals. We've been absolutely clear about that, as has the United States and the Ukrainian military. Let me be uncategorical about this. We will not be involved in training that unit.
And time, Ms. Gallant. Mr. Harris, please, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And I have to say, General Lawson should get a medal for bravery for showing up today after yesterday's incidents in the media. But I do want to follow up on that, General, because we had a statement from Madam Justice Deschamps in her report, which I will read to you. It says, "The military is rife with discrimination and abuse towards women, and abuse towards women starts from their first days in uniform, while commanders write it off as part of life in the armed forces." And then her conclusion is, "There is an undeniable problem of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the Canadian Armed Forces, which requires direct and sustained action." Do you agree with that statement in light of your comments last night, and in light of the fact that your own internal report, completed about a year ago, said that there was nothing wrong with the policies and procedures in the Canadian Armed Forces?
First, Mr. Chair, I do agree that we do have a problem that needs to be addressed. I would take issue with the characterization of my internal study, which did say that policies were in place, however, indicated that reporting was likely not at a level that we needed, and various other issues that led me to then commission the report that was carried out by Madame Deschamps. Her number one recommendation is indeed that we have a problem that we need to deal with, and to accept that we have a problem at the highest levels, and we have done that, Mr. Chair.
General, your statement last night, although you issued what I don't know if it would be characterized as an apology, although it has been called that, you recognize that it was an awkward statement. But the suggestion that the problem of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the Army is something of a biological imperative that men can't help themselves seems to be archaic at best. And would you not agree that that kind of attitude, if it were pervasive in the military, and particularly at the senior command level like yourself, would in fact contribute to that problem or even covertly excuse it?
I agree, Mr. Chair, that there can be no excuse for sexual misconduct. The nature of my comments yesterday came from a question saying, here in 2015, how can it be that the Canadian Armed Forces are dealing with sexual misconduct? And in view of the fact that this is a societal problem that we see across academic institutions, police forces, broadcast perhaps even on the Hill itself, it was an unhelpful conjecture on my part as to what might motivate someone in a heinous way to believe that they could press themselves on someone else. It was not helpful. And it is for that reason that I apologize for that opening. The remainder of the remarks were that this is unacceptable and we are committed to addressing it.
Mr. Kenny, in light of the report of Madame Deschamps and certainly the comments, even though he's taking them back today and apologized for them, many Canadians feel that the military cannot solve its own problem. And it seems to be that you, in your department and your government, seem to be taking implicitly the attitude that this is the military's problem, you go ahead and solve it. Are you and your government prepared to take responsibility to ensure that women or LBGT, which have also been identified, individuals who join the military are going to be safeguarded and safe in a safe place if they join the military? Are you going to take responsibility for that? And are you and your government going to follow up on an ongoing basis to ensure that that's happening?
Yes and yes.
Well, that's a commitment that I will assure you this side of the House and many Canadians will want to follow up on a regular basis. If I may move to a couple of incidents, and one recent one. Who gave the authorization to risk the Canadian Forces members, officials, and the Prime Minister himself to go to the front lines of the activity and mission in Iraq, where the Prime Minister said that Canadian Forces members would not be for the sake of a photo op, with no operational or public purposes to the what I would call a stunt for a photo op for publicity purposes. Was that authorized by you, Minister Kenny, or by you, General Lawson? Because it seems to me that the special forces, additional special forces, people who were brought there, any officials who were there, the Prime Minister himself, would have been placed in a dangerous situation on front lines where we know there have been incidents of return fire and fire. That seems to me to be reckless. It seems to be done solely for the purpose of photo ops. And why would you, Minister, or you, General Lawson, authorize that? Or did the authorization come from somewhere else?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Defence authorized their own movements. In terms of the additional Special Operations Forces who were deployed there, they were there in as a close personal protection unit, which is one of the functions for which they are trained. It's part of their mandate. The Prime Minister and I, for example, also visited the 2 Canadian Air Force bases out of which we are operating in Kuwait, and would normally, going on a military visit of that nature to that region, would have a soft protection as part of close personal protection. That would be the normal protocol, I believe. And we, as I understand it, we were not, as you characterize it, to Mr. Harris, quotes, on the front line. The forward line of the Kurdish Peshmerga troops was ahead of us. We thought it was important, however, for the Government of Canada to demonstrate our support for both our forces operating in the region, our Kurdish allies, and to demonstrate a message of resolve, and I believe it was well appreciated.
Mr. Harris. You're just short of your 7 minutes, but it's...
In light of the previous questioner and who asked a short question and got a long question and a long answer.
A very short question and answer would be...
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In light of the recent, and I'll just read two headlines, are Canada and the West losing war against ISIS? ISIS poses bigger threat after nearly a year of coalition bombing, and Islamist group now more immediate risk to more people, larger centres than ever. Does Canada have any independent strategy in terms of understanding what's going on the ground in Iraq with the three separate forces at work here, the Shiites, the Shia, and the Kurds, without any diplomatic presence other than one liaison officer in Iraq, in Baghdad?
Mr. Harris.
Nothing in Syria, nothing in Iran. Do we have an independent strategy, or are we just tagging along?
The answer is neither. That's a classic leading question, as you will know, Council. We do not have an independent strategy, but nor are we just tagging along. We are part of a coalition. That is part of a coalition strategy. There, at the invitation of the Iraqi government, the lead countries in that coalition are the Sovereign Republic of Iraq and the United States, which is coordinating coalition efforts. Our chief has participated in Chief of Defense Staff meetings with his counterparts to discuss and provide input to strategy. I have offered our views to U.S. Secretary of Defense Carter and many of my European counterparts whose forces are involved in the coalition. We met with Prime Minister El Abadi in Baghdad about precisely this point. You, I think, have mischaracterized the degree of our diplomatic presence in Iraq. In fact, Ambassador Sakamani, who, yes, is normally resident in Amman, has spent an enormous amount of time developing connections and connecting with with officials in both Baghdad and Erbil. So I think we've been a meaningful presence in the international coalition meetings and military strategy, and that is what has helped to define our deployment in Operation Impact.
Thank you. Mr. Williamson, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Minister Kenny, you recently returned from a visit to Iraq where you visited our men and women in uniform. Could you, based on that trip and other information you might have, provide us with an update on Operation Impact to date?
Yes. So as I indicated in my opening statement, Chair, the Royal Canadian Air Force has, as of last week, flown over 1,000 sorties altogether. I understand that the Hornets have struck just over 100 ISIS targets. Typically, they do so firing 2 munitions at each target. So I believe we've expended about over 200 munitions. I mentioned the volume of aviation fuel that has been delivered through aerial refueling through our Polaris aircraft and our Auroras, modernized Auroras, have been. I have been briefed when I was in the region. Have been regarded as an extremely effective platform for aerial reconnaissance that has been very rich in providing targeting information to coalition headquarters. I can also inform the committee. Mr. Harris, understandably, I think for partisan political reasons, mischaracterized our visit to Erbil as a, quote, stunt. In fact, I think it's hugely important to actually get on the ground and to get a tactile sense of the context of what's really happening. And what we could see talking to our relatively junior officers of the soft forces who are actually doing the training, they were actually able to describe to us the kinds of tactics that they have been able to transfer to the Peshmerga, the kinds of tactics that they perfected during their own operations, Canadian operations in Afghanistan. They told us that the Peshmerga who they've been dealing with are eager to learn and are very quick to pick up on the principles of the training that they have received. And we would infer from the relative success of the Peshmerga, both defensively and offensively against ISIS in that region, that the training has been effective. One might even go a step further and infer that it has been more effective than some of the conventional military training provided to Iraqi army units in southern Iraq who have been, shall we say, less effective in maintaining their territory.
And let me ask you, Minister, about I think the list you provided is impressive. It shows CAF activity in the region. we're going to recess here very, very shortly. What about the outcomes? I see a map in front of all of us which shows it appears to be ISIS territory diminishing, but at the same time we're seeing reports where another city fell. What, as we're home in our district and folks are asking us about the mission, what is the impact of our involvement with our allies in the area? Is the situation getting better? How would you describe it?
I would describe this like any military operation or conflict as being complex. We should never expect an operation like this to move in one simple, straight line. There are always going to be advances and setbacks, but fundamentally it has gone in the right direction since international forces came to bear last October, including those of the Canadian military, since which time, as I've said, according to the United States, according factually to the maps, ISIS has lost control of about 25 to 30% of the territory that it controlled last August. So I guess what you could say to your constituents is we're on the right side of this. We're certainly on the right side of history, the right side of human dignity in defending the vulnerable minorities who have fled the Nineveh plains to behind the Kurdish lines. We are defending the Iraqi people at the invitation of the government of Iraq. We are defending Canada and its security interests against this genocidal death cult that has declared hostility to this country, that at least inspired 2 terror attacks on our own soil last year, and which has radicalized and recruited well over 100 Canadians to join its dystopian campaign to create this kind of 7th century caliphate that regards women as property and minorities as fodder for genocide. This is, I think it would be grossly irresponsible for Canada in such a context, in such a conflict, to allow our historic allies to do all of the fighting for us. That would be completely inconsistent with our history, our identity, and our role as a responsible international partner.
Very good. My time. Would you talk to us a little bit about the morale of the men and women in uniform who are serving in the region that you visited recently?
Extraordinarily high, and I must say I've had the privilege of being Minister of National Defence for only a few months, since February, and since that time, everywhere I've gone on domestic bases or abroad, I have truly been impressed by the morale of the men and women in uniform, and I'll be honest, I was unexpected to find how boastful they are about much of the equipment they have, including modernized and new equipment. I could see that on HMCS Fredericton last week and HMCS Calgary, one of our modernized frigates during Operation Trident Fury off the west coast last month. I could see it with the C-17 crews when I received our 5th Globe Master at CFB Trenton. And the maintenance crews boasting about the new maintenance hangar that they have down there, the kind of thing that doesn't get a lot of media attention, but is the core of, of operational effectiveness. I could see it in Operation Maple Resolve in CFB Wainwright a couple of weeks ago when I attended live fire exercises jointly conducted by the Van Duze and the Lord Strathcona light horse tank operators. Everywhere I go, I see a kind of sense that they are pleased with the equipment they have, the kind of missions, important missions around the world, the training opportunities. It's hard to make an objective read of that, but and of course there must be people out there who are dissatisfied. In a big organization, that will always be the case. But so far in my first 4 months, I have not encountered them.
Thank you. On time, Ms. Murray. We're moving into the second round now. 5 minutes, please. Oh, I'm sorry, you're the tail end of the first round. 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair.
I stand corrected.
So I'd like to ask a question of General Lawson. Is the department looking at closing any military bases in Canada over the coming 12 to 18 months? And if so, which ones?
Mr. Chair, as efforts move ahead to provide input to the updating of Canada First Defence Strategy, those are the types of things, refinement of the Canadian Armed Forces equipment, personnel, units, basing, the types of things that we provide input on, which is absolutely confidential, and I would not share.
Okay, so you are considering closing some, but you're not going to tell us which ones are under consideration.
I wouldn't confirm or deny that, Madam.
Okay, thank you. And what could have possessed you to make the comments that you made to Peter Mansbridge, General?
Mr. Chair, the comments to which I have apologized referred to a question in which the interviewer had mentioned how can we be dealing with sexual assault in 2015. In view of the prevalence of this issue being a societal problem, my unhelpful comments were a conjecture that really did serve no purpose and, in fact, clouded the very strong efforts that we have going forward.
That was, I heard that explanation earlier. I thought there may be some other clarity. I mean, it was not a slip of the tongue. It was clearly a belief because you reinforced it several times. And so my question would be, well, I have to say that it's not since I was a young teenager that the idea would be, the excuse would be made that boys just can't help themselves. That's the kind of thing that people used to say 35, 45 years ago. So this is a very interesting excuse for sexual harassment and assault. So I would just ask, how do you think that your comments regarding sexual violence in the military might affect those serving in Operations Impact and Reassurance?
Mr. Chair, in no way did I indicate, even for the comments that I apologize for, that there is any excuse for any type of sexual misconduct by anyone in uniform, nor would I ever do that, nor does anyone in uniform believe that.
Okay, so I would like to explore the idea of the trust and confidence of the troops that the CDS must command in order to be in that role. And so I would like to ask the minister whether he believes that the comments and the attitude and what I would consider normalization of inappropriate sexual behavior and hostility, how might that affect the trust and command and confidence of the troops, especially women and LGBTQ military members?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not entirely clear on the question,
well,
but I reject its premise.
No, it's
there
a
is
question.
and must be no tolerance for or any excuses offered for sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, particularly in an organization such as the Canadian military, which is based on the concept of honor and professionalism.
Exactly. So my question is, do you believe that your Chief of Defence Staff can still command the trust and confidence of women and LGBTQ Armed Forces members?
The Prime Minister reflected the government's view on this during question period. The General has apologized for his remarks before you repeatedly here today, has retracted them, and I think we can all agree that there must be no expression or even implication of any kind of excuse for sexual misconduct in a public institution such as the Canadian Armed Forces.
Thank you. So I'm hearing no answer to that question, and I'll have to expect that the answer might be no, that he cannot command the trust and respect of the troops. I have another question, and I'd like to say, Minister, that I support the idea of showing solidarity with Canadian troops, especially ones that are in dangerous situations abroad. But I'd like to ask some questions about the cost of these photo opportunities. So we had the Prime Minister, his wife, the Minister, an entourage, photographers and videographers on HMCS Fredericton, which had to interrupt its participation in NATO squadron exercise. in order to have the photos of the minister and the prime minister looking through binoculars. And so can the Chief of Defence Staff give me an estimate of what might have been the cost of that exercise? And secondly, with the visit to Kurdistan near Erbil, the media were left in Erbil, but an entire platoon of JTF-2 commandos had to be flown in for this photo exercise, along with an entire convoy of heavily armored sport utility vehicles, according to media accounts. And so what might have been the cost of setting up that photo exercise? And together, can you give me an estimate of what this has cost the Canadian Armed Forces?
Before the general, I don't know if he has a figure. I don't have a figure. But I would say that the context would be comparable and the cost probably comparable to Prime Minister Martin flying to Sri Lanka to visit the Canadian Armed Forces Disaster Assistance Response Team, to Prime Minister Kretchen flying to Bosnia to visit the Canadian Army deployment as part of the peacekeeping operation in Bosnia.
Order, please.
Prime Minister Mackenzie King visiting Canadian troops deployed in Europe, to other heads of government who visit their troops in the field as a regular expression of public solidarity for the work that their militaries do.
So thank you very
General
much
Lawson.
for your history, and I would like an answer to my question. And perhaps the Chief of Defence Staff could compare it to the cost of updating military family housing, of which I understand 41% is substandard and is an expression
Order,
of this
Ms. Murray,
minister's
time.
priority.
Allow the general to respond, please.
Mr. Chair, all costs are tracked, of course, for every taxpayer dollar spent in defence purposes. Often, the costs associated with a visit of members of the Government of Canada fit in to regular activities. However, all costs are tracked, and we will provide that to the Chair.
Thank you. We move now into the second round of questions. Now 5-minute segments. Mr. Bazan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Minister and Generals and the Admiral for being here for another technical briefing, which, again, comes to the basis that we've been very open and transparent about our activities in Operation Reassurance and Operation Impact. Just want to remind Ms. Murray that when we go and show solidarity with our troops, it's quite different than the $40 million the Liberals took in the ad scam, or when Prime Minister Kretchen went and visited our troops in Bosnia and couldn't even put on his helmet properly. But that being the point, I'll just move on. I want to get back to the comment and the question around the precision-guided munitions, and that the minister had received information that wasn't entirely correct. And I just want to ask you, General Lawson, how did that come to be that we didn't have all that information before sharing it publicly?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Our belief, our understanding from information we had from the coalition that the particular weapon that Canadians were carrying was only being carried by the American, by the USAF. In fact, one of the other coalition partners who was in there later indicated that they were getting that weapon, that had that weapon, and that was our mistake in providing that information forward. We got that to the minister as quickly as we could. We apologize for that as well.
Thank you. I want to go to Operation Reassurance, and Minister, if you can go into more detail as to what our troops are going to be doing in Ukraine, what type of training they're going to be providing, where they're going to be providing it, just so that we have a better understanding what's going to be happening there this summer and again later in the fall.
Sure. Well, with respect to Operation Reassurance, specifically, we will continue through the balance of 2015 to have a company-sized force of roughly 200 infantry personnel deployed in Poland. In fact, the Prime Minister and I saw some of them. They came to Warsaw to participate in some of our events during our meetings in Poland. The current rotation are from Madame Gallant's riding, the RCRs from Garrison Petawawa, and they're doing a great job. And I believe they're going to be rotated out next month and replaced by a company-sized formation from the Van Dusen Valcartier. We have had, as you know, several CF-18 Hornets that have flown a Baltic air policing mission over the Baltic states, and they were part of that time at least based in Romania. They've since been repatriated back to Canada, but we've indicated at some point in the future that if there is an opening for us to participate in Baltic air policing, we would be willing to give that serious consideration. And of course, the forward deployment of a frigate as part of NATO assurance measures currently, Fredericton in the Baltic, part of Operation Balltops. But in addition to the Operation Reassurance mission, there will be other very important NATO joint training exercises this summer. Operation Trident Juncture, I understand, will be the largest, or one of the largest, NATO joint training exercises in the post-Cold War period, largely occurring in Southern Europe, in Spain, Portugal, and Italy. And I understand that we will be deploying some 1,650 personnel through all three services to Operation Trident Juncture, which sends another important message to others in Europe who might be forces of instability. Finally, again, outside the box of Op Reassurance, there is what we are doing in Ukraine. And we have a map up on the screens. I hope it's been, a paper copy has also been distributed. You can see in Yavoriv in far west central Ukraine, which is between Lviv and the Polish border, that's where we'll have our largest training operation. Approximately 200 troops doing conventional combat training, initially of National Guard units, starting in full force there in September. But we have the smaller, more discrete training operations. We'll be doing down in Kamenets Polski, the IED training. We're doing military MP training, not members of parliament, but military police, to be clear, around Kiev, and other operations, including aerial safety training, medical training, etc. All of that will be in central or western Ukraine.
And time, Mr. Bazan. Madame Michaud, s'il vous plaît, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that the subject was raised by a number of my colleagues as part of the committee proceedings. My first question then is for General Lawson. I'd like to obtain certain clarifications in relation to the comments that you made yesterday. I don't want to dwell particularly on the comment that caused the controversy. It was inappropriate, we can agree. But in your following statement, you were making apologies, and there's something that you did state that I find rather concerning. You said that you want to deal very seriously with the problem of sexual misconduct in the Canadian Armed Forces through an action plan that is based on the 10 recommendations from the Deschamps report. But once again, it would appear that there is a certain hesitation about the willingness of the Canadian Armed Forces to adopt all the recommendations. This is something that has we've noted from the beginning. My mother is a member of the Armed Forces, and I've always worried a bit about the safety of her working environment, and I'm wondering whether the Canadian Armed Forces do intend to adopt all the recommendations that were made in the Deschamps report.
First of all, I should be clear that all 10 recommendations made by Madame Deschamps, we will achieve the outcomes that she was suggesting. 2 of them we've accepted immediately, and the questioner is right that 8, we are absolutely committed to the outcome that Madame Deschamps is recommending. She was one person working for one short period of time. I've now got a team under Lieutenant General Christine Whitecross of 25 people working over a period, making sure that we connect how we get from where we are now to the outcome that Madame Deschamps seeks, and we will get there.
Je vous remercie. Alors, j'ai entendu le ministre.
Thank you. I also heard the minister made a formal commitment to keep an eye on the situation and to ensure that the outcomes are obtained. Of course, on my side, My colleagues and I will be following this up very closely. It is one of our priorities. I also have members from Valcartier in my constituency, and I find this a serious cause for concern. But to turn to the subject of this committee, I mentioned the Valcartier basis. There will be 220 members of this basis, the parachutists mainly, who will be sent to Poland as part of the exercise on the 28th of June. And it is the first rotation that will be spending 6 months in Poland rather than 3 months. Perhaps you could explain why this rotation will be lasting longer for a particular instance? Unfortunately, we have someone else to look after this. All the rotations that are put into effect are based on the various exercises. We ensure that there will be activities, and this will be based on agreements with the Poles or the other countries. Each rotation is based on the particular events that are taking place for training, and Canadians will be involved in demonstrating what we wish to accomplish in relation to Russian aggressiveness in Europe. In the case of the soldiers who will be deployed, they will be going to Poland. It may come about that they will be in Ukraine as well and other countries. Is this something that may evolve in the course of the mission? The answer is no. These are two quite distinct things. In the case of reassurance, this is a training that is taking place in Poland. There are some certain countries, for example, we sent troops for training, and we asked them to show their experience in winter warfare, and they shared this with other countries. But in the case of individuals who will be going to Ukraine, this is a very specific role, and what we are looking for is to be sending them in places where they can demonstrate their capabilities, whether it's for the training of military police or for flight safety. It's these are quite distinct missions.
Mr. Norlock, please. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the witnesses, thank you for attending today. Minister, I have two questions. The first one, of course, I don't really believe that Canadians have been properly advised of the especially given your two portfolios, the minority groups in Canada that you've talked about who are being targeted by ISIS, and Canada's military mission and why it's needed. And secondly, we know we're talking about military missions, but Canada has our strategy, and our government's initiatives have a humanitarian nature to them, and they have a broader scope. So I wonder if you could talk about those two issues.
Sure. Before I do so, though, Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to note that this may well be Mr. Norlock's last parliamentary intervention after 9 years of public service here and many years before that in the Ontario Police, and I'd like to thank him for his service as a passionate advocate for the people of the Canadian Armed Forces representing our Air Force Wing at Trenton. Thank you, sir, for being a great partner for the military. You're quite right. I think there is a humanitarian imperative for our Operation Impact in Iraq and Syria. You know, let's go back to last August when people were reading and seeing on television images of Yazidis, this ancient sort of Gnostic religious community who have faced waves of persecution. There are still a couple of 100,000 of them left. And they were fleeing their ancient homes and villages in the Ninevan Plains to go up to the center of their ancient homeland in Mount Sinjar. And they were literally being hunted down by Daesh, by ISIL terrorists. As soon as ISIL could grab a Yazidi woman or girl, as young as the age of 8, they were thrown into a sexual slavery and human trafficking operation, which is absolutely odious. And there have been confirmed reports of them selling these women on the market, going to other places in the Middle East. Some girls as young as 8 being raped multiple times a day, treated as property or of war games by the ISIL terrorists or the Daesh terrorists. Think of the Assyrian people. They're the indigenous people of the Ninevan plains of Mesopotamia. They've been around there for thousands of years speaking Aramaic and have been Christians for 1,700 years, long before Arabic or Islam showed up in Mesopotamia. And they were also being hunted down. I think I've said in the House, in a speech, I spoke to the leader of the Chaldean Christian Church of the Assyrians, who told me about how in Mosul, Daesh went into the hospitals and approached the elderly, infirm, handicapped Assyrian Christians who could not leave and threatened them with being beheaded in their hospital beds if they did not convert to Islam on the spot. This is what we are talking about. These are the kinds of deprivations that we have. I don't think we've seen evil of this so raw since the death camps of the SS in the Nazi regime. And so I hope people understand there is a profound moral obligation for us to be there, as well as a security one.
Thank you. And I wonder if you might talk about the government's broader scope and initiatives in the area. You know, we talk about the military equipment, et cetera, but we're also doing humanitarian work in these areas.
So, yes, humanitarian work, in addition to the humanitarian protection of our military, we are, I believe, the 6th largest donor to overseas development assistance for internally displaced Iraqis, many of whom find themselves behind the Kurdish lines in northeastern Iraq. I'd be happy to provide details to the committee, but when the Prime Minister and I were there, we announced additional funding. I believe we're now over $100 million in monetary support through international agencies like the World Food Programme, UNICEF, the UNHCR operating in Iraq, in addition to over $600 million in support as the 5th largest donor country, supporting IDPs in Syria and Syrian refugees in Jordan, Lebanon, and to some extent Turkey.
And one other quick topic, because of course it's been in the news recently. President Obama announced that the United States will be sending approximately 400 additional troops to Iraq. And can you speak to whether there are any plans to expand our Canadian Armed Forces role in Iraq?
We do not have plans to do so. Mr. Chairman, the government was clear in the motion tabled before Parliament about our intention for the up until April of 2016 to maintain the 69 special operators in the Kurdish region, as well as the 9 aircraft based out of Kuwait. Obviously, we will participate in ongoing discussions with our coalition partners, but we believe that's a significant contribution. Obviously, an assessment will have to be made next spring about whether or the nature of an ongoing Canadian commitment.
Thank you, and that brings to an end.
Be time for one quick question to the Minister, asking for a timeline on the implementation of the Deschamps report.
To that question, Mr. Minister?
Well, I'm waiting for a detailed report from the military through Lieutenant General Christine Whitecross, who, as the CDS has explained, is charged with developing the action plan. I look forward to receiving her advice on a timeline. But I can tell you that all of the senior military commanders with whom I have dealt with on this matter have been absolutely clear that they intend to move forward with implementation of the recommendations as soon as possible.
Thank you, Minister Kenny. Thank you, Generals, Admiral, for your briefing, this update on operations reassurance and impact. This meeting is adjourned.